very much for joining me here today on the Dream Big Summit Part 1 for the free audience participation today with an amazing, wise woman who comes in a pair, but she'll be the spokesperson. It's Dudley Evenson from Dean and Dudley Evenson from soundings.com. They have played music since the forevers, for the last 40 years, together, have produced albums that have been played everywhere, have been in all sorts of bestseller lists. Soundings music is known for the flute music that especially Dean plays. Dudley plays harp and percussion. Together they produce what was becoming well known through the massage era, where all the massage spas played Soundings music. They have oodles of CDs out, and we met them always at the different fairs where we all participated and presented our talents to the world. And that's where we met each other originally. And now Dudley has turned also an author. She is a co-author in the best-selling book, The Big Secret with Jack Canfield, and is now publishing her book this fall, coming out just in time, Quieting the Monkey Mind. And that's obviously something we all need to know about, and how she uses music to help us get into another state of consciousness for all the listeners that feel drawn to music, to travel with into the inner silence. Now, I want to introduce you to Dudley Evenson right here, and they have some very amazing information to share, especially since they've been around the block 5 times already, and or 6 times, maybe. Anyhow, I would love to ask you, but share anything I haven't mentioned yet. And of course, we go into details, and I would love to invite people to check out your free offer for music and guided meditations that they'll get here in the freebie. So Dudley, welcome to the Dream Big Summit, and it's over to you.
Thank you, Ilona. I'm so honored to be part of this wonderful seminar webinar that you're producing. And I know what a big deal it is, because Dean and I produced it was a series of DVDs called Sonic Healing, Meet the Masters video course, and we interviewed 30 sound healers, including ourselves. So it was like putting it all together, meeting people, learning from so many different areas, and particularly in our field, which was sound healing. So that was our experience in terms of just one aspect of what we've been up to. But I know what you're going through. Organizing all the, what do they say? It's like herding cats or something, where all these people to settle down and come on to your programs. So this is very exciting.
Yes, and I mean, it is my heart to share consciousness and consciousness raising tools. So healing through music has always been on my heart, and we will have you sharing about the wisdom that you've learned from other people, the things that you've learned from your experience with traveling with music, Quieting the Monkey Mind, your book. Everything can be found on your website, soundings.com. Now, I would love to have you share with me specifics on what you've learned. And you know what I first want to focus on is your 60s experience. I know that you also start your book, Monkey Mind, Quieting the Monkey Mind, with that concept of, in the 60s, you knew what to stand up against, but you learned since something much more powerful that makes your dreams come true in a much better way. So please tell me about that.
Well, one of the things I share in the book is just the idea that, and Dean and I were both born in the 40s, so we're children that were born during World War II, and it was a terrible time to be alive. And then as we grew up, we, went through the process of the 50s, and then when the 60s came around, sort of the comforts that we'd been experiencing, and this was a big deal for our parents because they'd gone through the Depression and they'd gone through the World War, but we hadn't had that experience. We'd been kind of in a comfortable environment for many years, and what happened was we discovered that there were certain prejudices and there were certain things that were going on against people of color, and just the whole civil rights movement started springing up in the 60s, and then also the Vietnam War was happening toward the end of the 60s, and we became aware of that. So there was a lot of protesting happening, and Dean and I were fortunate to meet in 1968. He moved in across the hall from me in New York City. And I had just come back from living in Japan and learning photography and getting into all that sort of thing. But what happened was, when we met, we were kind of we were both ready, and I can go into more detail about attracting your soulmate when we do the longer version.
Yes, let's do that in the second part. Yes.
That was fun because I was ready, and it was time. So we met, and we were just in our mid-20s, and that was, now that's in our 70s now, so things have moved along.
Oh, but 7 times around the block. Yes.
Yeah,
oh my God.
Yeah. Turns around the block. But what was interesting is there was this realization that we had about, okay, we know what we're against. We know we didn't want war, we didn't want prejudice, we didn't want all this discrimination that was happening against people right in our own neighborhoods. But what we didn't know at the time was what we were for. And so Dean and I were very fortunate because in 1970 we purchased a Sony half-inch black and white video camera, and this was early video. You now take for granted the cell phones and everything. You can make any kind of high definition video on your little phone. But in those days, it wasn't possible. It was only CBS, ABC, and NBC. So we just had a few TV networks, and there was no way to have everyday people, share their stories. And so we started exploring in the early 70s with this video camera. We went around, traveled around the country. We went to Stockholm to the UN Conference on the Environment. We were really inspired by Native Americans who were talking about Mother Earth and what that's about. And we hadn't heard that. The big deal was litter and maybe a little bit about pollution, but we learned that there's a lot more to consider when we're talking about our Mother Earth. And so that became a real influence for us. And Dean ended up being called out to Wounded Knee in South Dakota in 1973 to videotape the standoff there. And lately in our recent times, we've heard about Standing Rock and, Water is Life, those kind of campaigns. But this happened in 1973 and our connection with Native people. So that became a real important area for us. The other thing is in the 70s, for those of you who are around, you may remember, but the younger ones, you're not going to be quite as aware of when did it all start? When did we start learning about living on the earth in balance? When did we learn that eating well and eating organic food and healthy, GMO wasn't even a concept then, but just, doing really the healthy living that we are now moving towards, which is exciting. And the other thing that we learned was the principles. We attended Arnold Patton workshops. We audio taped his events, and we played music at them. So we were really honored to learn the way he put it together as universal principles. And what we learned by reading the, getting into yoga and meditation and studying, autobiography of a yogi, you've got it coming from the East, you've got it coming from the West, you've got the Native Americans. So all these things started coming together for us into a philosophy of life that allows us to live our dreams, but also be in balance. And how can we use the principles? And these are basic principles.
And make a difference, make a positive impact in life.
Difference and understand why we are born. It isn't just to have a cushy life and get all the fancy cars and have multiple televisions and whatnot. And Dean and I lived during the 70s. We lived in a half-size school bus, so we were traveling the country in our little bus. I actually gave birth to our second daughter in the bus and videotaped it. So we did all that. But we were learning was from these wisdom keepers, these Native American elders, from the Indian gurus, from Tibetan lamas, from rabbis, ministers. We learned principles, the basic principles, and it resonated with us in terms of our Christian background in the biblical sense and what Jesus said. It wasn't that different from what they were saying about it in India or somewhere else. It was just like, love your neighbor, be kind, be in balance, take care of one another, be of service. And so that was just how Dean and I evolved. And it was a powerful time because it was our decade of intentional poverty. We had no money, we bartered, we, grew food, or we
Yes.
sprouted things and made our own yogurt and bread and ground our flour in the bus.
Yes,
And
yes.
and believe me, it was a fun time. It was, we didn't.
I'm busting with questions. First of all, I love that we have you on board because you can bring and tie together the past to the present. We are again in an era where a lot of people were finding division here. We're finding conflict arising globally, international, as well as nationally, especially. And the intention to divide and to separate is huge. We actually are needing to make sure that we aren't falling for the divide and conquer technique. So when you learned that we're not, how to get your dreams had nothing to do with finding out what you were against, but what you were for, how did you make that a felt experience, and how did you shift your consciousness, or how did you tell me stories of how you manifested that?
Well, we were artists. We're musicians. We're videographers. I was a photographer. Dean had been playing flute since he was 10 years old. So we decided to use our music and our media to educate people and uplift people. In fact, one of the early projects that we were working on in terms of the video was how to bring people together that were of different points of view.
Right.
And I remember there was this, we lived in New York, and there was a big anti-war protest down by the downtown Manhattan. It turns out it was the hard hats who were building the World Trade Towers. I didn't realize this till many years later. And the hippies and the anti-war, and they were in big conflict. And it occurred to us that if you go deep enough, we can find ways to find harmony and connection. We can understand each other. But when we're in the height of conflict, we're not going to be listening. And so one of our goals in terms of the video was to present people to each other, for fellow Americans to meet each other and just see that, we're all human beings. We all want life, liberty, and happiness. Yeah. How can we come to in terms of respecting each other and not judging each other?
Yep.
And you mentioned conflict. I always call it apparent conflict, the appearance of conflict. And of course, the news media today does everything they can to fan the flames of conflict. That's how they sell their magazines and their internet sites and whatnot.
Right.
But if you go deep enough, and if you talk to your neighbors who voted differently from you, you're going to find you have many things in common. And so that's one of the things that Dean and I have always worked on, is trying to find balance, trying to find a resolution to conflict, and just putting it into practice, because it's all about love. And Jesus said, love your neighbor. But if you don't know your neighbor, and if you think your neighbor's different from you and thus wrong or bad, then you're never going to get to love your neighbor. So we're really about getting to know our neighbors. And we lived in a little town in upstate New York in the 70s, and we would videotape their square dances and interview the local police chief and the guy who worked in the stone quarry and the farmer. And, we wanted to know these people. And so we've had a lot of experience getting to know people who are different from us. And that's, I feel like, really important in this era that we're living in, when conflict is just the name of the game. And we don't
so just reaching out to the other, to, Martin Luther King, a great orator, said, love your neighbor to death. If they've done you wrong, just love them even more. They're not going to be able to do anything afterwards. And so I've taken those words to heart and done it a couple of times in my lives where I wished I could have just gone, But no, I went over, I said, I'm sorry, or, how can I help you? And then suddenly they turn into angels.
I had a conflict once with a neighbor, and I just felt terrible about it. And I would do this little mantra. I would sing it to out in nature, and we were living in the woods anyway, and I'd say, I forgive you, please forgive me. And it was just it was coming to the or another time I had a conflict with somebody, it was I release and let go with love and compassion. So I was finding that I was using affirmations, positive affirmations and mantra, even before I knew what mantra was. And it was really important, because what Quieting the Monkey Mind, my new book, How to Meditate with Music, is all about, is using these tools, using mantra, affirmations, toning, chanting, and all that sort of thing, using those practices to help clear your mind, because our minds are very, very busy, and it's only natural that when something happens or we feel bad and we think we're supposed to feel bad about it, but we're not. We're really not supposed to feel bad about anything. If something happens to us, we get to deal with it. We get to heal it, or
we get to.
we get
And
to.
it
And
is becomes our stepping stone. Exactly. I love that. So we can create in anybody to remember, create your own mantra. I mean, even if you just want to start, this is what I'm grateful for. This is what I'm grateful for. Or this is beautiful. And you look at a beautiful flower. This is beautiful. Or looking at you and seeing all the different chakras with the different symbols. And, you know, I love all the pictures you have with the Dalai Lama, it just seems like all the luminaries you have photos with everywhere you go. You have been an example of being not only with the higher ups, but with the bottom down people, the downtrodden, everybody. You just go and you're open, you connect with. And so I think you're living proof that when you're open, doors open.
Well, and looking at judgment, we have a lot of judgments. Everyone does. It's natural. We think we're supposed to, I like this, I don't like that. Our mind is a binary system, and
Right.
we're constantly approving or disapproving. And so when we can let go of that constant judgment, it's not to say we don't discern. It's not to say we invite everybody home for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to live with everybody, but we can still love them. And we can disapprove of someone, but we can still love them. So I really believe that love is the absolute answer to every problem that we have. And when we can even love our enemies, to me, that was the most radical thing that I've ever heard. Jesus said, love your enemy. Well, if you love your enemy, and I've had incidences of opportunities to love someone that was maybe not being kind to me, or there was some problem, and I just keep loving, putting that love, again, letting go of attachment to it. I mean, you look at the Buddhist principles, you go to the Hindu, karma, all cause and effect, it's all there in the spiritual books. And so when you can really absorb them and understand that this isn't just a bunch of people writing something down that has nothing to do with anything, it is truth, it's principle, universal principles. Yes. And one thing I'll say is, what you focus on expands. That's what one of the Patton really identified. What you focus on expands. And people call it the law of attraction now, or whatever they want to name it. But it's just the basic thing is, like, if you're always complaining, if you're always focusing on your suffering or your pain, it's going to be a continuing process for you. But if you can, as you say, express gratitude, even appreciation, okay, good. Now I get to practice this. Now I get to learn this.
Right.
And it's the tools that you're given to be able to, move forward and not dwell on it and not stay caught up in the suffering, because life is suffering. Buddha said life is suffering. There's a cause of suffering. The cause of suffering is attachment. And when we're attached to how we think it should be, or it's this or that, and then when it isn't exactly the way we want it to be, then we suffer. So we can let go of that.
Well, especially when we find the core, the seat of our soul, when we identify with consciousness, then everything is up for grabs to be changed, and instantly at times. That's the beauty of, and that's what I'm trying to have been teaching, have been helping people realize, is this: we can change even the moment, the instant. Our neighbors or any incidences, sometimes big or global instances, what we focus on is what we get. So use it as a mantra, create your own mantra. So let's go back to music and to healing and meditation. I know some people are not as capable with meditation as others. Like you say, the monkey mind. Tell us about quieting the monkey mind. What are some techniques you've found that really work?
Well, as I said before, one of the things that, well, first of all, we all have monkey mind. Monkey mind is simply that you picture a little monkey on your shoulder talking in your ear. That monkey is really yourself, but it's saying to you things that maybe your mother or father said, you're not good enough, or you can't succeed, or you're a mess, or maybe it's an ex-partner who always found criticism with you or judged you in some way. So what happens is we incorporate those concepts in ourselves, and then we begin to repeat them within our own mind. Now, we are affirming in that case that we aren't good enough.
If we listen to it, pay attention to it, even fight it,
So what we want to do with an elevated consciousness is we want to lift ourselves above that monkey mind. And it isn't easy because our mind is fabulously intricate, and it has access to every thought we've ever had or every experience we've ever had. So you can imagine the synapses and the patterns and the integration of all the pathways that take you here or there or remind you of something. So everything has an association. So what we want to do, or one of the things we can do, is focus on, so meditation obviously is going to have several aspects. We don't just say, oh, good, I'm going to close my eyes and meditate. It just doesn't happen. You've got to practice. So say you're a musician and you want to learn how to play the piano or the flute or the guitar. What are you going to do? You're not just going to sit down and do it. You got to practice. You got to start at the beginning, and you got to do this, then practice that, and then you do the other, and you practice that. So that's why I say practice makes perfect. You cannot just suddenly meditate.
Yep.
So that's one thing.
Perfect. Wonderful. Because a lot of people go like, well, I tried meditating last week, didn't work.
Well, my mind was busy. Yeah, my mind was busy and I couldn't stop my thoughts. Well, that's the whole point. And that's why meditation is a much deeper and grander experience than simply quieting the monkey mind.
Right. Yes. Let's take that into segment number 2. I want to ask you your experiences, because you are an experienced meditator. It's my pet peeve project. I love to discover what people experience and, map out the inner worlds, but not many people do enough of it to even have a map or share what they experience, or what they've seen other people experience. So I'm going to ask you that question again. Yes. Second part. Okay. We have soulmate and inner dimensions, what you see, experience, the monkey mind. Now let's continue with that vein of thought. Learning to practice, to quieting the mind is the first step in meditation.
Right. And so you need concentration devices, for instance, breathing, the breath. And of course, everyone it's almost commonplace now. Oh, you're stressed. Well, take a deep breath. It's everyday people who don't even have any experience with monkey mind get it, that breathing is super important, because we breathe about a third of our lung capacity in general. So we're often, when we're upset or uptight or stressed, we're holding our breath, or even afraid, we're holding our breath. So I've had 3 children, and I learned the Lamaze method of natural childbirth, and that was a long time ago. But one of the things that fascinated me is that you're learning, the deep inhalation and the long, slow exhalation. Those are just simple parts of it, but you also do there's panting breath. There's all kinds of different breathing techniques. Well, what we're learning when we give birth to a baby, we're learning to overcome pain and to change our focus. But when I studied this in the 70s, when I was first having my children, it fascinated me because we were also getting into yoga and meditation and the pranayama and the breathing techniques of yogis. So I thought, this is very interesting, because moms-to-be and yogis are doing the same kind of breathing.
Yeah.
So then as you get into, and we'll go into this more in the second part, but some specific breathing techniques. But one of the things that you'll find when you do focus on the breath is that you're able to slow your heart rate down, slow your systems down. And then you're able to, when your mind starts to wander, then you focus back on your breath. So the breath is the first step, and you'll hear that a lot in terms of, people first learning to meditate. Yeah. But it isn't just, and I offer all kinds of breath counting and different systems of holding the breath and this and that. Nothing too complicated, but because it doesn't have to be.
So let's just do one simple technique. It's the yogic breath, right? Let's just do that all together here, maybe for just a minute and a half. You'll see, we'll all feel, would you? No, after you're finished. Okay.
Yeah. So starting with just the simple part of taking a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. So we're just going to do that. And that is the basics. Now, add another aspect to it. So let's do breathing in and hold. So I'm just going to breathe in, count to 4, and I'm going to hold for the count of 8. Then I'm going to breathe out to the count of 8.
Okay.
So let's breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now exhale 8. Breathe in 4. Hold 8. Exhale 8. And so that's just the simplest of breath counting. So what we're really trying to do is control the breath, control the mind. This is how it works.
And
so,
I love already how it makes me feel calmer. You know, it's like instantly, even oxygenation happens. The brain gets, you know, it reduces cortisol levels when we stress out. I do this just when I speed up. I instantly slow down and do my yogic breath, feed oxygen into my brain, and I'm instantly better.
And one of the things to consider when you're doing the breathing is you want to have a faster inhalation and a slower exhalation. So it could be twice as much, or it could be 4 times as much, but if you just think twice. So if you're counting to 4, inhale, hold 8, exhale 8.
Okay.
That can be the simplest of simple breathing, breath counting. And as I say in the book, breath counting is not meditation, but
right.
what it does is it prepares you for the process of calming you. And another thing you can do, which adds another element of sound to your exhalation.
Yes.
Let's just do that. This is called toning.
Okay.
It's called vocal toning. And in the book, I go through a whole bunch of different exercises and aspects of it. But I'm just going to teach you the simple one.
Okay.
Which is simply inhaling, and then we're going to exhale with a sound. And we'll make it like a little sound of just kind of a sigh. So let's just try that. And the other thing you'll notice when you exhale, you're going to be putting a brake on your breath. So as I said before, you want to inhale twice as fast as exhale. So we're going to slow down the exhalation. And again, that just everything contributes to slowing down the thoughts, slowing down the heart rate.
Metabolism, yeah. Okay.
So let's do that. We'll take an inhalation through the nose and we'll exhale through the mouth with a sound.
Okay.
A light kind of sound. So we'll just do that.
Okay.
And what you're doing is you're toning, and you're also almost singing.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't sing. I'm shy. I'm embarrassed. The teacher told me to sing in the back of the choir or something." But the point is, everyone can sing, and everyone has a voice. So another simple exercise is where it's a faster exhalation. So we're going to do the same thing where we breathe in our nose, and then we're going to exhale like a panting sound. And this will be something like this. Ha, ha, ha. And put your hand below your abdomen. So you're feeling that's your diaphragm. That's
right.
And what it really is it's a pump. A lot of times people think they're.
So I'm sitting here with my hands on my diaphragm, right in the middle of my body, to feel and exchange, when I push. Okay.
So as you exhale, you're pumping that. If you think of a bellows for make a fire going, or even just blowing on a fire, you're extending the oxygen.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to inhale, and then we're going to breathe with that, contracting that muscle. And what that does is it causes your lungs to expand and contract. So we're just going to take a deep breath, and then we're going to do a bunch of ha, ha kind of sounds. So let's take a deep breath. Ha, 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 ha. And it's almost like a laugh, You're
all right. So I'm gonna do this visual here. So I'm gonna do ha 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 ha. As you see the hand moving. So if that's the movement we're getting, then you're on. Thank you. Okay. Okay.
Just a few simple things that involve breathing and toning that we'll go into more detail and do some more exercises.
Okay. I like that we already have some here. And you can feel, I can feel already more oxygen in my brain.
And I want to also remind you that if you're not used to breathing, you might experience a little bit of dizziness.
So be
right.
And tell us why that happens.
Well, because you're getting a lot more oxygen into your brain, and oxygen is good for the brain, but if you do it too much, too fast, too soon, you might, kind of just have a little bit of lightheadedness. It's not a problem, but I recommend that people aren't necessarily standing up or
Yeah.
they're feeling supported,
Overdoing it.
especially when you're first practicing, because as I said before, we breathe about a third of our lung capacity. So when you open up and you are expanding to full lung capacity, you're getting a lot more benefit from the oxygen, but you're also going to, have that option of a little bit of lightheadedness. So just be aware. Always be aware. And I say there is no right or wrong way to meditate. There's no right or wrong way to chant or do toning or any of this. I teach couple meditations. We can go into that a little bit in the second part. Some nice exercises that you can do with your partner. And again, it doesn't have to be your intimate partner. It could be a friend. It could even be a child.
Mm-hmm.
I stress that intimacy isn't about sexual necessarily.
Yes.
Of course, it can, but intimacy is simply about really having a deep connection with somebody. So we do some fun toning and chanting things with other people.
Let me just ask you, we will have another breath worker on here, but I want to ask you about what have you found that happens when people deeply bring oxygen into themselves? What happens on an emotional and even psychic or spiritual level?
Well, it's hard to say. Everyone is different. And I think, again, it's important to know that when we're not living our lives fully, then we're likely to maybe be more depressed, or different illnesses might occur or things like that. So I think that the breathing is going to help you on spiritual, emotional, and physical levels.
Yes, enlivens us. Actually, I mean, and that's what breath work does, right? It breaks through the traumatic shell that we've built up against the trauma that we once experienced to protect us, but then we walk around like little, shelled in beings, and you will learn to bust through those shells and then become alive and then start, maybe going to Japan or living in a bus or doing our dream without this armor around us.
Very important.
Yeah. So cool. You know what? I think we're way past our due time. I think it's been awesome. I want to take this conversation into the next half, especially how to use your consciousness to create a soulmate, how to be ready for your soulmate, because that's what you pointed out. You were ready. A lot of people have a wish list or wish, but they don't really oftentimes think they're either themselves there to bring that to the relationship, and or know even what to ask for. Do I want that he wears red socks, or what do I ask for?
Don't ask for things like that, I'll just say. And I will just give you a little hint of what I'll talk about in the next part. But attracting your soulmate is really about knowing who you are. And so I think that's the big part of what we want to work on, because you do not need to visualize a person who's 6 feet tall and has black hair or muscles or whatever. That's not the point. The point is, who are you? What resonates with your heart? What makes you happy? What lights you up? And what is your passion in life? Why are you here? Why were you born? And those are things we'll get into in the next part, because to me, addressing the reality of your existence on earth. I am alive. Why am I here? Everyone wants to know, why am I here? It isn't like, oh, I'm here to do this or that exactly. But there's different things that you will discover, because each of us is a unique, special individual. So once we know who we are in a better way, we're more likely to find the person that will resonate with us.
Right, because once we've defined and become conscious, we will attract someone who's conscious. We will see them across the street. They'll look, and we're like, wow, he's alive. She's alive. Yes.
I must say I'm very fortunate that I met Dean Evenson when I was in my mid-20s. We were both in our mid-20s, but just, that we both had the similar values.
Yes.
And somewhat of a vision for life, even though it changes. And we'll talk about change.
Yes.
Change is really important.
Yes.
You may start out on one path, but then you may need to shift, and it may be appropriate to make a roundabout turn, and that's okay too. So how we navigate change, I think, is a big part of it too.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So much to talk about. I want to ask one more final question about using music for peace to resolve conflict. Any last words on that?
Well, I mean, conflict, I believe the resolution of conflict begins within. Everything begins within. And so the more if you notice that you're in conflict with somebody, I really encourage you to look at yourself and what it is that it's resonating with you, because there's a good chance that it's something that you need to work on to heal within yourself. So it doesn't mean that we're all going to be exactly alike, or it's all going to work out perfectly with every single other person. But the more we know ourselves, the more we find a balance within ourselves, and also admit, recognize, and accept that, yep, I got that to work on. Okay, I may be kind of reflecting what my mother was, or that seems kind of familiar. I thought I'd done that already, but that doesn't mean it's over. You're going to keep working, because life is a work in process. We are never done. And we have things to learn at every step of the way. And that's what's the fun of it. So.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, it's not a perfectional end point that we reach. It's a journey that is beautiful while we enjoy
they didn't
it.
say, oh, we volunteered to be born and now come down, it's a piece of cake, everything's fixed. No. We're here for a reason. And there's a lot that we can do to help this planet and the people around us. So
yes.
Beautiful.
Okay. Thank you very much. Say again?
Peace through music.
Peace through music.
That's our particular angle, but there's many aspects.
Yeah, and I find that music alone puts us into a wave-like motion. We become separated from this identity that is a little cluster of an ego. That is, we move into a wave-like being state. And when we are in a wave-like being state, we are permeable. We become like a wave that interpenetrates others, and go into harmony with each other, go into the same wavelength. So I love Dean's flute music. I love your guys' CDs. We play them over. We have them everywhere. And you can find, you're on Pandora, you're on, I think.
Spotify. Look for Dean Evenson on Spotify, or we have a YouTube channel.
And
the Planet. We have hundreds of videos on YouTube.
Okay, so where do I find you on YouTube?
Just search Soundings of the Planet, or if you want to go directly to our website, soundings.com, and you can click through to our Facebook and our YouTube channels over there.
Yeah. And I mean, you are a living example of being alive into your 70s and beyond. I mean, God, I didn't dare to say that, but you have been around the block. And you are still running around the block and are alive and kicking. You're going to be joining for the Quilly Award. You're going to be meeting all the bestsellers. You're going to be meeting with Jack Canfield. I wish I was there, but that will be in Hollywood. Wish you all the best. That'll be an event that will have already happened by the time you listen to us. Thank you, Dudley. And Evenson, we want to spell with E-V-E, like Eve, Evenson. That way you found it. Dudley and Dean Evenson. Thank you, Dudley. I see you in the next segment.